Welcome to the Crane Bag Podcast. I am Jay Leeming. Today we're going to begin exploring the cycle of stories focused on the Trojan War. This is a vast collection of stories involving myth, legend, and history as well. It brings together gods and humans, and it asks many questions of us about death, about fate, about our own abilities to choose our future or not. And surprisingly, at the center of this story is not simply death and war, but in fact, love. Thank you for joining me. I am glad you are here. Let us begin. Once there was a man chained to a mountaintop at the edge of the world. He was chained by his wrists, and he was chained by his ankles. And there was a great stake driven through his chest into the stone beneath him. But he did not die, for he was more than a man. He was one of the old gods, a titan, and his name was Prometheus. He had stolen fire from the gods and given it to humans. So humans who had been shivering in the darkness of their caves now had fire. They gloried in the warmth of this fire and enjoyed the gift of its brightness. And as they gathered around these fires, they began to tell stories of the past. And so their powers of memory deepened. And then they began to tell stories about the future. And they realized there was not simply one future, but there could be many, and that they could choose between them. And so humans began to live in a world, not simply of fate alone, but also of possibility. But Zeus, the king of the gods, had not liked this. So he had commanded Hephaestus, the blacksmith of the gods, to chain Prometheus to a mountaintop at the edge of the world. And there he lay, day in and day out, child of earth and sky as he was, lying there on the ground, with his eyes open, his body exposed to the air and the cold wind and the darkness of the night. And by day the sun beat down, and by night he would look up and see the circling stars. So he lay there for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And then one day, a young man wearing golden sandals, stepped out of the air and stood beside him. It was Hermes, the messenger of the gods. "The age of Zeus is over," said Hermes. "The time of the Olympian gods is done. For soon Zeus and all his vast company of gods, Poseidon, Ares, Aphrodite, Athena, even me, myself, Hermes, we shall all be cast down into the darkness below the earth. All this shall occur because there exists in this world a woman with the power to give birth to a son who shall be stronger and more powerful than his father. Zeus is fated to be this father, and so there shall come into this world a new god, with a weapon stronger than the trident of Poseidon, or the thunderbolt of Zeus. And this new god shall cast all of us down into darkness, and there we shall come to know what death is." This is what the oracles say. The dragon priestess at Delphi says it, and the seers among men. Even the ancient Sibyl of Troy says it. But they all also say that you, Prometheus, alone in all of creation, you know the secret to how Zeus can be saved. So Zeus commands you to tell him what you know, and if you do so, he will give you your freedom. He shall break your chains, and you shall be free once again to wander this world. These are the words of Zeus. This is the message that I bring. "Hermes," said Prometheus, "tell your master this. Tell him that desire shall be his undoing. And as for his freedom, I have no need of it, for soon he shall be cast down to the underworld, and then I shall have freedom enough." "This is the answer," said Hermes, "which Zeus expected to hear. So he has commanded me to tell you this. From this day forward there shall come an eagle each day out of the sky. This eagle shall devour your liver. As you are a god, in the night your liver will regrow itself, and you will be healed. But the next day the hunger of the eagle will return as well. So Zeus will add pain to your pains, until at last you comply and tell him what he wants to know." "Let Zeus send 1,000 eagles," said Prometheus. "I will tell him nothing." Hearing these words, Hermes scowled and stepped up into the air and vanished. Well, that very day, as Prometheus lay there in the shining light of Helios, the sun, that very day there came over him a shadow, flitting silently. He opened his eyes. There was an eagle above him, circling. And then all at once it dove down, landed on his hips, and darted its beak down into his belly. Prometheus writhed this way and that, and the beak went down, stabbing, fishing around in his innards. It pulled out his liver, golden and steaming in the cold air, and gobbled it down. And then, leaving Prometheus spattered in his own golden blood, the eagle leapt up into the air, beat its wings, and went away into the sky. Prometheus lay there. He could do nothing else, helpless as he was. And then darkness came to him and to the world. And in that darkness his liver regrew itself. It found again the melody of its own being. And by morning Prometheus was healed. He was whole once again. But when the next day dawned and the sun shone down, on that day as well the eagle returned, and once again devoured his liver and flew away. So it went day after day. And then one night Prometheus heard a murmur in the stone beneath him, a whispering voice. And it was the voice of Gaia, the earth, the mother of all life. And she said, "Prometheus, my son, these humans who you care for, they oppress me. They cut down my trees, they level my forests, they dig and tunnel into my hills and mountains. The very weight of their feet upon the ground is a great burden and a pain to me. Prometheus, my son, tell Zeus what you know. For if you do so, there shall be born into this world not a god but a man named Achilles. He shall be the greatest warrior this world has ever seen. And he shall send many souls down to the underworld, and by so doing ease the burden upon me of so much humanity. My son, hear my words, hear my pain. Do this for me." "I hear your words, O mother," said Prometheus, "and I shall do as you say." Well, the next day Helios drove his chariot through the sky, and that bristling light came down, spangling the world with its generous gift. And once again on that day the eagle came. Its shadow passed over Prometheus, and the eagle dove down and landed on Prometheus and darted its beak down into his belly and gobbled down that liver. But this time, as the eagle was there, perched on Prometheus's hips, he looked at the eagle, and he spoke, and he said, "Eagle, bird of Zeus, tell your master this. If he wishes to save himself, he must not sleep with the goddess Thetis, the lady of the deep waters. For she is the one who is destined to bring forth a child into this world who shall be more powerful than his father. What Zeus must do is find a way to bring her together in love with King Peleus of Phthia. And then there shall be born into this world a great warrior who shall be named Achilles. If Zeus wishes to save himself, this is what he must do." And then Prometheus looked more deeply at that eagle. "But perhaps you're no eagle at all, bird. Perhaps you are Zeus himself, for you do love to change your form, do you not, O Lord of the lightning?" The eagle looked at him strangely. It cocked its head to the side, and then it leapt up into the air and flapped its wings, and higher it went. But then, suddenly, out of the air, there came a whistling sound, an arrow. Shunk! It went right into the breast of the eagle, and it flapped, twisted, writhing, came down and fell down dead on the rock beside Prometheus. And then Prometheus heard footsteps, and to the top of this mountain there came a great, fierce, powerfully built man. He was dressed in a lion's skin, and he had a bow and a quiver of arrows strapped to his back, and a great club in his hand. And he said, "You're free, fire-bringer." And with that club he smashed all the 4 chains there which bound Prometheus to the rock. And then he reached down and took hold of that great spike, and he wrenched it out and threw it clattering down the side of that mountain. Prometheus gasped and groaned. "Thank you," he said. "Thank you, Heracles." "You are welcome," said Heracles. And after some time Prometheus sat up, and then he stood up. And he and Heracles stood there on the top of that mountain, looking out at the world. And they could see everything beneath them. They could see the wide land of Greece. And across the sea they could see the land of Troy. And beyond Troy they could see the land of the Amazons. And then far to the south they saw Africa. And beyond Africa they saw the great girdling stream of Oceanus, the river which surrounds this world, and out of which, some say, the gods were born. And as they watched, storm clouds moved in over the coast of Greece. And then they saw lightning flash down, but they heard no thunder, for the storm was very far away. "Zeus brings rain," said Heracles. "Yes," said Prometheus. "It's one of his ways of making things happen." "What will you do now?" said Heracles. "Well, there's a great war coming," said Prometheus. "I cannot stop that war. I cannot save the lives of those fated to die either. But perhaps I can ease the suffering of those who will be injured. So I will go to Thessaly. There is a healer there named Machaon, living in a white stone house beneath a walnut tree. Apollo taught him many things about healing and the powers of the plant world, but he didn't teach him everything. So I will go visit the healer Machaon, and I will tell him everything that Apollo forgot to say." And then the sound of the thunder reached them, and it boomed and crackled around the barren peak of that mountain. "Farewell," said Prometheus. "Farewell," said Heracles. And with that, Prometheus began to walk down the mountain. Well, far away from that mountain peak it was raining. Raining on the leaves of the trees, and on the grasses in the fields. Raining on the rivers, and on the shore of the sea. And there was a man walking along that shore. He was a king without a queen. And he was there because he'd had a dream the night before that he would find love on the seashore. So he was walking through the sand, when suddenly a cloudburst came out of the sky. And he looked around for shelter, and looking ahead he saw a rocky place and a cave amid those rocks. So he ran to that cave and went inside, and stood there in that dry cave looking out at the sea and at the rain falling upon it. But as he watched, he noticed a strange piece of driftwood out there between the waves. And then he looked closer, and he saw that it looked like a seal. And then he looked again, and it was definitely a woman swimming through the sea in a storm. And she was swimming straight for the shore and straight for that cave. And as he watched, she came to the shore, climbed out of the sea, the water rippling down from her shoulders down to her hips and to her toes. And she strode confidently towards that cave. Well, this man shrank back from the mouth of the cave. He went back into the shadows. He sat down in the darkness at the very end of the cave. And the woman came in, and she stood in the mouth of the cave, and she kindled a fire there, and she sat down beside it as the flames crackled up, and she gloried in the warmth of that fire and in the gift of its brightness. And then something unexpected happened, an accident which was to change everything that followed. For the man in the back of the cave sneezed. "Achoo! Who's there?" she said. "Who shares this cave with me?" "I am just a wanderer," he said. A man walking the beach. I was looking for a dry place out of the rain." "Well, you've found one, but step into the light, wanderer. I wish to see you." So the man stood up and stepped out of the shadows. "I know who you are," she said. "You're King Peleus, the king of this very land. You sailed with Jason to the edge of the earth, and you also took part in the Caledonian boar hunt, And what's more, you once wrestled Atalanta, the strongest woman in the world." "It's true," said Peleus. "I did all those things. I sailed to the edge of the world, yes. I took part in the Caledonian boar hunt, but I was not the one to kill the boar. And I did wrestle Atalanta, but, well, she threw me to the ground. So today you see me simply a king without a queen, a lonely man walking along the beach, and now caught in the rain." "Well, sit down beside me, king without a queen. This fire is warm, and I am glad for your company." So he sat down beside her, and they both looked out at the rain falling on the sea. And then Peleus said, "Well, you know who I am, but who are you?" "Who am I?" she said. "Yes, that's a good question, Woman that I am, swimming in the sea in a storm. Woman that I am, far from villages and houses, far from the loom and the cooking pot. Who am I, really? Are you certain that I am even, in fact, human?" He took a good look at her. "I'd say you were from elsewhere," he said. "Elsewhere," she laughed. "What if I told you that I was the fire, and the rain falling on the waves, and that I was also the waters of the deep sea?" "You are not the fire," he said. "No," she said, "I'm not the fire, and I'm not the rain either, but I am the waters of the deep sea." And she leaned forward, and they kissed, and that kiss was a blossom on a branch rooted in the beautiful darkness of the earth. And then he slipped his hands around her back, and they embraced, but as they did so, suddenly she transformed. She became warm, hot. She became a swarm of bees, droning and buzzing in the air. Peleus cried out, and then she became a great lion, clawing the stones of that cave. And then she became a great tree, and then a fire, and then a wriggling octopus, its tentacles going into every corner of that cave. He cried out, and then, at last, she became a woman again. Who are you?" he said. "I am Thetis, the goddess of the deep waters, and I shall stay with you, king, so long as you agree not to question any action that I take. Can you do that?" "Yes," he said, "I can." And they kissed again and held each other close, and they shared the delights of love there in that cave. And outside, the waves broke against the shore and swept up the beach, each one of them like a traveler who, after a long journey, has at last arrived home. Well, when the rain stopped falling, the two of them walked out of that cave and into the sunlight. And they walked hand in hand along the beach, and then through the forest, and back to the palace where King Peleus lived. And Thetis spent the night in that palace with him, and she began to spend every night in that palace. And often they could be seen walking along the beach, or through the forest, or up those forested paths of Mount Pelion, the great mountain at the center of King Peleus's kingdom. And after some time, the two of them decided to be married. And so they prepared everything. The palace was prepared, and the servants worked, and invitations were sent out into the world. And on the day, when the glorious day came, servants in the kitchen of the palace took a great cake and put it in a wooden box, and they carried this wooden box to a wagon. And they loaded this wagon up with clay jars of honey and wine and sweet and beautiful things. And musicians got into wagons as well. And then, at a word, they all went up the rutted tracks of this forest, of this mountain, up to the heights of this mountain, Mount Pelion. And there was a meadow there at the top of this mountain, and nearby a cave where Chiron the centaur lived. So all the people of King Peleus's kingdom went up, ascending to the heights of this mountain. But as Thetis was a goddess, the gods came as well, and they came down. From the realm of Olympus, they came to the peak of this mountain. And Zeus came, and Athena, and Hera, and Aphrodite, and Poseidon, and Hephaestus as well. And they brought golden tables, which they set out in the grass. And there was nectar and ambrosia for the gods, just as there was ordinary food and drink for the men and women of the earth. And then they all gathered in that field, there, in that meadow, and amid the flowers, Peleus and Thetis were married. Zeus officiated, and the two of them said the beautiful words, braiding their lives together to make a single strand. And then the 9 muses sang, and their song was beautiful as the seasons are beautiful, and the seasons seemed to be within this song. Every leaf, every flower, every buzzing bee, and the flies, and the broad, wide sky, and the sea itself, all of these things were in their song. And when that song ended, it was like the fading away of a dream. And then Peleus sat down in a beautiful carved wooden chair, and Thetis sat beside him in a golden chair, inlaid with stones from the depths of the sea. And everyone came and gave them gifts. Hera brought a beautiful cloak she'd made with her own hands for Peleus. And Chiron the centaur came, and he had a spear. It had been polished by Athena. The head of this spear had been made by Hephaestus himself, and he presented it to the two of them. And Nereus, the old man of the sea, came, dressed in a cloak that held within it all the colors of the ocean waves. And he set down before them, as a gift, a basket of divine and magical salt. And then he gave them his blessing, and he walked away. And Poseidon came to them, leading 2 horses by their halters. And he said, "These are immortal horses. They have been born out of the waves of the sea. They cannot die. And what's more, when the time is right, they have been known to speak. Their names are Baelius and Xanthus, and they are my gift to you." And Poseidon walked away, and the 2 horses looked at Peleus and Thetis for a moment, and then they bent their heads down and began to nibble the grass. And then a sturdy, tall man approached them. He was old, but he was beautiful in his age, like a boulder or a great tree. And he knelt down before them, and he brought his hand out, and when he opened his hand, there were 2 rings there in his palm, and into each ring there was set a stone. And the man said, "I am Prometheus, and this is my gift to you. When you wear these rings, may you be reminded of the freedom that can come from being bound." And they each took one of the rings, and they exchanged rings, placing them on each other's fingers. And Prometheus smiled gently and then walked away. And then everyone sat down at the beautiful tables, the gods at the golden tables, the humans at the wooden tables. And there was delicious food of all kinds, roast meat and bread and cheese and wine crafted from the grapes of this earth. And the gods and the humans began to tell stories, mingling these stories one into the other. And Hephaestus told a joke which was like a rabbit scampering away in the grass, and everyone laughed. And as they sat there at those tables, as the gods and the humans laughed and talked together, time seemed to stop, and that moment itself seemed to become a beautiful flower, a flower you could always return to, for it would never wither and never fade. And then Apollo picked up his lyre and began to play. And hearing this, everyone stood up from the tables and began to dance in the green grass. And Athena and Hera and Aphrodite all joined hands, and laughing together, they danced in a circle. And Peleus and Thetis danced, and Poseidon as well, and Hephaestus danced, and all the 9 muses. And it seemed that the earth and the sky, and the crashing sea, and even the rocks and the wind themselves were all a part of this glorious dance. Then there came, out of the forest, a woman dressed all in black, bent over like a dry stick. Hermes was the first to see her. He walked towards her, and he said, "Dear woman, please, tell me who you are." And she said, "I am the uninvited." And Apollo stopped playing, and everyone stopped dancing. And she walked from where Hermes stood into the gathering. And then this woman, in a cloak the color of night, pulled a golden apple out from that cloak, and she threw it through the air so that it landed in the grass directly before Athena, Hera, and Aphrodite. And then she turned and walked away. And then she was gone as the wind is gone, leaving no trace. Hera bent down and picked the golden apple up. "It's an apple," she said. "Yes," said Athena, "of course it's an apple, but look, it's got words on it." And she snatched the apple from Hera, and she looked at it closely. And then she read the words out for everyone to hear. It says, "For the most beautiful of them all." "Well, clearly," said Aphrodite, "this gift is meant for me, for I am the goddess of love and beauty." "Yes, you are," said Hera. "We all know that. But I am beautiful also. And what's more, I am the queen of the universe. Isn't it right that a gift such as this should go to me?" "And what of me?" said Athena, "goddess of wisdom and strategy that I am. Am I not also beautiful? Are these qualities not also beautiful in the world?" "I am simply saying," said Aphrodite, "that if a gift such as this, which is clearly meant to go to the most beautiful goddess of them all, does not go to me, the goddess of love and beauty, well then, something is seriously wrong with the world." "Dear ones," said Athena, "let us bring this apple to Father Zeus, for surely in his wisdom he will be able to decide to whom this gift should be given." So the three goddesses walked to one of the golden tables where Zeus was sitting at the end of this table, drinking from a cup. And Athena took the apple and placed it down on the table before him. "Father Zeus, we need a decision." Zeus looked at the three of them. He picked up the apple. He read the words written upon it. And then he looked at the three of them again. Athena, his own daughter, the goddess of wisdom and strategy. Hera, his wife, queen of the universe, queen of heaven. And Aphrodite, not a child of Zeus, but a being, a goddess made at the beginning of time, born out of the sea itself. "I cannot decide this," said Zeus, "for, as you know, I give my love so easily to all the beings of this creation. No, we need someone who's far from us, far from our ideas and opinions. I think we need a human, and I know just the man. For across the sea, on the slopes of Mount Ida, in the forest there is living a man. Well, he thinks he's a shepherd, but he isn't really. His name is Paris, and in fact, he's no shepherd, but a prince from the beautiful and glorious city of Troy." Well, there it is. Welcome. Thank you for listening to this story. What a rich mix this is, huh? What an amazing playground for the soul this story is. These stories aren't just, reports of events that happened long ago. They aren't just the imaginings of a single person. They are the creations of an entire culture over generations, over hundreds, if not thousands of years. And so it's just like, I don't know. I mean, I guess if you're a soil scientist or something, it's like really rich soil and a lot of things are growing. It's like a rainforest as opposed to a parking lot. There are just a lot of ways into this story, I feel. Even this little glimpse of the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of the whole Trojan War experience. And who do you feel like? Where do you find yourself on the map in the territory that is this story? Maybe you're not there, and that's fine. Not every story has to be a map for your life. Your life doesn't have to be in every story. But nevertheless, there are a lot of ways in. For myself, I go right away. I mean, there's some just juicy moments. There's Prometheus, the essential rebel, the prime sort of revolter against the gods. Rebel guy. Fantastic up there on his rock. And then this amazing wedding, this marriage of heaven and earth, of the world of the gods and the world of the humans, which goes wonderfully until it doesn't. And then we get some trouble, which, of course, is where we are headed. Well, so I set out to tell the story. I am setting out to tell the story of the Iliad, so to speak. But the Iliad, that's stories of Troy. That generally refers to Homer's Iliad. So I've just dug a little deeper. I've looked a little more widely. These stories here, technically they're from something called the Cypria, which is named after Cyprus, the island of Cyprus, sacred to Aphrodite, goddess of love, where a poet is apparently supposed to have lived who told an epic about the events leading to the Trojan War. So anyway, this is just a footnote, but that's what you got here. But let's dive into this. Let's feel it around us. Prometheus up there on his wintry cliff. And it's kind of complicated and interesting. And we have fire. He's the one who stole fire and gave it to humans. Zeus didn't want that. What does that mean? What does that mean that the king of the gods wants humans to stay dumb and cold, basically? Well, it means he's mean, I guess. It means he sees us perhaps as a threat to his power. Is that possible? He is a god who is on the lookout, certainly. Interesting to compare with Odin, right? Odin in the Norse world, he knows the end is going to come, and he's sort of always looking for ways to prevent that. But there's a sort of fatalism to Odin. It's going to happen, pretty much. Zeus, on the other hand, it's more like a disaster which can be averted. There's more of a sense in the Greek world that, I can prevent this, because really I am going to be just king forever. Even though before him, the two earlier rulers were deposed, Cronus and then Uranus before that, both of them thrown down from their thrones. So we get this really interesting situation where Zeus is going to sleep with Thetis, the goddess of the deep sea, as I've called her, and she has the power to bring forth into this world a son who will be stronger than his father. And if Zeus should be that father, whoa, look out. Then we're going to have an even more powerful god who's going to throw Zeus and everybody else in the slammer at the bottom of the world, and that's it. Interesting situation. And Prometheus says those words, desire shall be his undoing, which is great. This story isn't that common. It's not one of the most well-known episodes from Greek myth stories from Greek myth. But it's pretty striking, just because Zeus is always just having sex with everything he can, right? He's turning into a shower of gold. He turns into a swan. He turns into a bull, I believe, on numerous occasions. So he's just sleeping around all the time. That's the standard thing for him. And just a little footnote here. If he's a man, we find that reprehensible, as well we should. If he is a man in a relationship with a woman, Hera in this case, we don't want that. We want fidelity. We want loyalty. We want someone who doesn't want to hurt their spouse by sleeping around, who cares enough for their spouse that they are going to have compassion for them and will realize the hurt and the sadness, the anger, etc., which will come from sleeping around. So that's how we feel as humans, and I share that feeling. But it must be said, Zeus is a god. He's not a human. And so what does that mean? Do we judge them in the same way? So Zeus sleeping around, maybe it's similar to a hurricane knocking down a house. We can yell at the hurricane. We want it not to do that, but it is the nature of hurricanes to knock down houses. If we put them up, the hurricane's going to knock them down. It is the nature of Zeus to fall in love with all of the beings, as he puts it, all of the elements of his creation, which looked at that way is sort of, in a way, cool. Can I say that? Dare I say that? Oh, I don't know. I have to think about that. He falls in love with everything in his creation. Well, mostly the women, we should say, but sometimes the boys as well. So, I don't know. If he's caretaker of the universe, is that a good thing? Hard to say. Certainly, much craziness comes from it, and many strange children are born who have some mysterious and wild and difficult childhoods because of Hera is then angry at them, Heracles being one of them. Anyway, it's great. You pull on this story, pretty soon the whole sweater comes unraveled in your hands, but it's a beautiful sweater. So let's just go with this sweater. So what I'm saying is Zeus is not a human man. He's a god. And so he has this thing where he sleeps with everything as much as he can. And he does not respect his marriage to Hera that much, we should say. But then we get this situation where this very quality of Zeus, which is so intrinsic to him as a god, is going to be his undoing, which feels perfectly right. Like he's going to finally just sleep with Thetis, and he will he'll be the father of a being who will then send him down to Tartarus, the underworld below the underworld, the dark of all darkness places. So I just find that really interesting and poetic and beautiful. It's justice, I suppose. It's justice for all those who've been wronged by Zeus sleeping around, we could say. But this doesn't happen. Okay? And Prometheus wants it to happen. He wants Zeus to be cast down. He's against the power structure. And we have this fascinating meeting of two tricksters as well, Hermes and Prometheus. Can we call them tricksters? Well, Hermes certainly was at the beginning of his career as a god, but soon became sort of assimilated into the power structure and became simply the messenger of Zeus. So he sold out, we could say. He sold out. That's one way to look at it. Prometheus, as some people have pointed out, Lewis Hyde among them in his amazing book, Trickster Makes This World, Prometheus is, he suffers a little too much to be a trickster, because tricksters always find a way out. And Prometheus here, based on his principles, basically, he does not find a way out, and he is on this mountain for a long, long time. He does not sell out, but as a consequence, he suffers. But he does know the future. He does know Zeus is going to fall down, be cast down, and and no longer be king of the world, king of the universe. But then the earth speaks up. And again, this is a marvelously sort of contemporary detail, a contemporary voice, right? Gaia, the mother of all life, Earth herself is saying, get these humans off me. They are a pain. They are a pain in the neck, pain in the everything. They're digging stuff up. They're mining for uranium here. They're digging up stuff for cell phone batteries in the Congo, right? That's what she's saying. And then she says the sheer weight of them upon me is too much. And so there's going to be a war. Now, the ultimate causes of this war, in telling this story, I've in some ways tried to go back to them. But beyond this, there are the fates, the three beings, female beings, in a cave that exists beyond or outside of time. They are the ones who measure out your life with the yarn there. Who well, one spins it out, one measures it, and one cuts it, and that's how long your life is going to be. But they decide more things than just the lives of humans. They decide events as well, and they have decided that there shall be a war, and that can't be avoided. So, as it happens, Gaia pleads with Prometheus. He then reveals the secret. And because of this, we get Thetis is going to, as we will see, spoiler alert, not give birth to a god, but give birth to a human, Achilles, the greatest warrior of them all. And he will kill so many people, they will go down to the underworld, and the earth will be, her burden will be eased, and things that will be less painful for her. Amazing. And perhaps we should pause for a moment to say that, in my understanding, the ancient Greek understanding of fate is simply that of cause and effect. One thing leads to another in an infinite series, and no one can be free of that. So it's surprisingly similar to the Hindu or Indian culture concept of karma. Right? You go outside in the winter, you get cold. That is fate. We think of fate as something preordained, but in their understanding, I mean, we're talking about thousands of years here, but at times their understanding was simply that fate is cause and effect, and the dance of cause and effect and the results, the chain of events that come from that. And where do I get this idea? Well, I wasn't there, right? But here's a quote for you. This is from Poseidonios of Apamea. Check it out. Who lived from about 135 BCE to 51 BC. And here's the quote. Reason compels us to believe that everything is governed by fate. That is to say, by an order or sequence of interrelated causes and their necessary effects. Let's have that one more time. Reason compels us to believe that everything is governed by fate. That is to say, by an order or sequence of interrelated causes and their necessary effects. So he was a Stoic philosopher who lived approximately 400 years after Homer's epics were written down, just to give us some perspective. So I find that very interesting, that fate, and the workings of fate are revealed by oracles in ancient Greece. The oracle at Delphi, where a priestess would inhale fumes from the earth, which would cause a lack of oxygen in her brain, and she would speak words which were intelligible. They weren't gibberish, but she wouldn't remember them after. And they would be recorded by a man. Always a woman would be under the influence, and a man would write them down. He would convert them into hexameters, which is a metrical form of poetry, so they could be remembered. And this is how fate was revealed. But there were numerous oracles in the Greek world. There were seers. We will encounter them in the Iliad proper. And Dodona was another place. So that's how fate was revealed as well. And also revealed through events of our daily lives, like the flights of birds, and, of course, a sneeze. That too, actually. And, and I'm just going to go on with this and say the liver of a sacrificed animal was also believed to reveal fate, reveal what was coming. So it's fascinating in that regard that what the eagle eats from Prometheus is his liver. Whoa. Now, what does that mean? Prometheus meaning the one who thinks ahead. Prometheus. He thinks ahead. Zeus doesn't think ahead so much in this story, but Prometheus does. He can think of the future. But Zeus sends an eagle to devour his liver. So some have said that the liver was seen to be the most sensitive part of us that feels fate the most acutely. And so when you kill an animal and look at that liver, you can tell there more clearly what is going to happen. I don't know what all that means, honestly, but I think it's great, and I want to sit on it for a while. Maybe Zeus wants to take away from Prometheus his ability to foresee the future. Maybe that's his sort of revenge. But I'm not sure that ability is lives in the liver necessarily. But anyway, fascinating. Yeah, so there we go with that. And then we get Peleus and Thetis, and this kind of beautiful love affair there along the shore where the sea and the land meet. And we get this wedding way up high on the peak of the mountain. Mountains govern the early parts of this story. We have the mountain upon which Prometheus is chained to that mountain. We have the mountain of Mount Pelion, where this wedding takes place, and we have Mount Ida in Troy, near Troy, and that was sacred to the goddess in the religion of the Hittites and the folks over there. So quite amazing. We have a mountain where a man who foresees the future is imprisoned, is punished by being there. We have a mountain where joy takes place, this wedding, and the gods come down to the mountain and the humans go up. And then we've got this mountain, Mount Ida, where Zeus will observe the Trojan War. He will go there to watch it, and where, in some ways, it starts, as we shall see in our next section to come. But we have this wedding high up, and it's just a beautiful scene. So many stories are circles, fairy tales especially. It seems like most stories are circular, and they go around, and they describe ever-returning events. As we plunge, as we explore the stories around the Trojan War, I feel like this great sort of, I can picture this huge circle being sort of unbent and then stretched out and somewhat laboriously turned into a line. Because we have these stories which do seem circular and seem somewhat like fairy tales. They have the solidity and the wisdom and the numinous quality of fairy tales, such as the wedding where the goddess of trouble, strife, shows up and tosses this apple in there. Or Prometheus on his mountain, even. That seems sort of a eternal situation, a recurring situation. It was seen by many in the movie Oppenheimer, right? And then seen in his life, right? The guy who wrote the biography of Oppenheimer saw that as him as the American Prometheus, because he stole fire and then was punished for it. All those grueling Senate hearings, right? So I feel like we can look at these scenes and see them as like recurring moments that we might step into, and like it or not, we may find ourselves in those moments. And so we can learn from these stories in that way. But we're also entering, in a way, historical time. The Trojan War was a major sort of benchmark, a marker for time. Time in the ancient Greek world was more fluid, more local than it is for us. We live with a global time system. They had calendars for each city-state, basically. There was no common calendar for all of what we would call ancient Greece. And so the way things were dated was by events, by certain rulers, and a major event that everyone knew about was the Trojan War. So in a way, I feel this beautiful, somewhat sad, bittersweet feeling in this story as we enter this story of leaving the mythic time and entering historical time. Now, the Trojan War has been told so much. It has taken on this status of myth and of legend. And we can step into it and find meaning there. It can be a map for the conflicts in our lives and for the choices we make. Yet, nevertheless, there's a feeling, to me at least, of historical time beginning. And we're leaving that mythical realm. And looked at in that way, this wedding, this tremendous feast, this joyous feast where humans and gods are united, is the last event of its kind. For humans and gods will never celebrate in exactly this way again, because things will dissolve into bitterness. The gods will be at each other's throats, and humans, there'll be lots of, well, we'll see, lots of blood and death to come. I don't know how true that is when you think of the wide scope of Greek myth. And we can well imagine further reconciliations happening after the Trojan War. But nevertheless, it does feel to me like a sort of an end point. And this gives this feast, this marriage, this wedding at the top of Mount Pelion a slightly a poignant quality as perhaps the last time when all of these gods will come together with the humans in such a joyous way. And the gifts are great, huh? The basket of divine salt from Nereus, the old man of the sea. Wow. What does that mean, divine salt? You use salt to preserve things. You use salt to intensify the flavor of foods. But this is divine salt, magical in some way. Maybe it is just stronger. Maybe it does more in some way. Anyway, it's a beautiful thing, this gift of salt to the wedding. When's the last time you brought salt to a wedding? That's something to think about. What does that mean? We get the divine horses from Poseidon, who will remain in our story, Xanthus and Balius, who speak every now and then when they are most needed, when their speech is most needed. And we get Prometheus shows up with these rings he gives them. Great stuff. So the ring, I mean, it symbolizes his imprisonment. It has the rock in it, which he was imprisoned on. It has the bindings. He was bound by chains to that rock. So a ring, by this way of thinking, is an echo. It's a keepsake. It's a reminder of his binding on that rock. And why does he want humans to remember that? Why at all? And is it connected to marriage in some way? Interesting. And, I mean, he's bound there because he gave us fire. Did that make marriage possible as well? There was a marriage torch in ancient Greece. You would raise the marriage torch. And that, of course, is fire. So maybe there's a connection there. Well, I find it very rich. I have not come to the end of these questions, but perhaps we can explore them further. And then we get this woman, the goddess Strife, shows up, and it is again, it's great. It's very similar to a fairy tale, specifically Sleeping Beauty, where if you remember, the baby girl is blessed by the 13 by 12 wise women, and the 13th comes and curses the child. The 13 wise women were initially all invited to the celebration, but then the king found out they've only got 12 golden plates, so they can't include the 13th wise woman. So that's a real sun and moon conflict there, because the king is coming from the solar realm, 12 golden plates, 12 months of the year. Of course, there's no room for a 13th moon. Come on, people. Whereas the 13 wise women, they represent the moon and the feminine qualities, 13 full moons in a year, in every calendar year there are. So they come anyway. The 13th one comes, and she brings trouble to the story of Sleeping Beauty because she curses the child. But it is necessary trouble. It is necessary for the growth of the child, for the maturation of the baby girl, that she have this a period of sleep, which only comes about because of what the 13th wise woman does. So here at the wedding of Peleus and Thetis, we have a perhaps similar scene. She brings something necessary. Oh, necessary, Mr. Jay Leeming? Is it necessary? Oh, man, it's a lot of death. That's saying a lot of death is necessary? Is that really the case? How can we say that? Is trouble necessary? None of us want trouble. None of us want suffering. But suffering exists. What part do we have in it? Is it fated? Can it be avoided? Do we have ability to choose? Well, maybe yes, maybe no. She comes to the gathering and she brings this apple. And these three goddesses who were dancing in a circle a moment before are suddenly arguing bitterly about who is the most beautiful. And then, of course, Zeus passes on the question to someone else. Not for me. Whoa, I'm not getting involved in this. Look at that choice he's got. It's crazy. He's got his daughter Athena, his wife Hera, and then Aphrodite, who was born when the severed genitals of Cronus were thrown into the sea. And from the foam of that, she arose. Wild. Yeah. So she is a force to be reckoned with, a primal force from the beginning of time. and not a child of Zeus. And so Zeus then passes this question off, this decision off, to someone far away, to Paris over there in the land of Troy, on the slopes of Mount Ida. Now, this isn't the first time. We see two occasions, actually, in this story where the gods do this. They take a problem and they pass it off to humans. We aren't going to deal with this, you are. The first being the situation with Prometheus. Zeus is fated to experience what it is to be overthrown, to experience death. But he doesn't want that, so he finds a way to pass that off to the human realm. And Achilles is then born, because there's this premonition, it's fated that Thetis shall give birth to a son who will be stronger than his father. And Zeus doesn't want to experience that, so it ends up being played out in the mortal realm. And Achilles will be born from Thetis. And, and of course that was fated as well in the world of the story. But nevertheless, we have a problem that the gods have to deal with, which then goes to the human realm. Because of all this, Achilles is going to be born, there's going to be a war, and the human realm will experience downfall and what it means. A great city, Troy, will be completely destroyed and razed to the ground. And Priam and his family will all die. Spoiler alert. I say spoiler alert, but knowing the end of this story is in fact key to the experience of this story. For everyone in the ancient Greek world who heard this story knew how it ended. Homer, in his Iliad, does not describe the destruction of Troy, but he describes the events leading up to it. And that destruction is assumed and is a known fact by everyone who heard this story. And so to know how this story ends, it's not simply to be in the know in a story, like knowing how some movie is going to end you're seeing. But it is crucial to the experience of this story and to the meaning it wishes to convey, which is that the future is fated. We like to believe that we live in a realm of choice, that we can choose. It's almost like we say to ourselves, well, I might die, but I might not. I'll see how I feel. Rationally, we know that that is not a choice. Rationally, we know that death will come. But still, we have this enormous energy around choice and freedom. But what these old stories tell us, and the world in which these stories were told, in that world, there is fate, and certain things are ordained, and they are going to happen. And we have choice, yes, but that exists within a realm of fate. Things have been decided. This is going to happen. So to know that Troy is going to be destroyed, that Priam's family, the king, Priam, and his wife Hecuba, they're all going to die. To know that Achilles is going to die, even though he is the greatest warrior in the world. These are not facts which ruin a good thing, which is our experience of the story. But they are ways for us to participate in this story in the same way that we participate in life itself, where we know that death is certain, though we may not know how it will happen, though we may not know what will happen between now and then. And though we are gifted or perhaps cursed with the knowledge of how things will turn out, be they this story in which Troy will be destroyed, or perhaps the knowledge that our own death will come. Still, we have choice. We have freedom within that, freedom of response. And we can choose how to respond to that knowledge. Though, like Prometheus, we see the future. We can decide how to live. And one response is to enjoy the colors of the grasses as we walk down the street, to enjoy the colors of the trees and the colors of the sky. One response is to breathe in and to breathe out, knowing that moment, knowing that each moment is itself a gift. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There is more to come. And if you are seeking stories, you can find them on my website, which is jayleeming.com, JAYLEEMING.com. If you are able to support this podcast, please do so. You can do that via Patreon. So patreon.com/storyjl. If you're able to do that, it maintains this podcast. This is free. You know, I provide this free, and it can remain free because generous folks like yourself have chosen to support my work through Patreon. And you also get certain things. You get free admission to online storytelling events. I'm recording this in December. In January, I'm going to tell the Mahabharata, the great epic of India, online. And you get free admission to that if you are a supporter on Patreon. Thank you so much for giving your attention to this story. I talk of money and websites, and those are beautiful and crucial things. But your attention to this story feeds the story as well. The story lives beyond us. It is a animal, perhaps, a plant, a land, a being unknown to us. We see it dimly in the silences between the words of the story itself. May we gift this story with our attention. Thank you for being here with me, and take care.